Ani, bonjour. Hi everyone, my name is Matt, and today we're going to be talking about Landmark 17. 3 different activities that you can do that don't require any fossil fuels. So fossil fuels are actually one of the leading contributions to climate change. And so the more activities that we can do that require less fossil fuels, the better for our planet. And with that, we can also reconnect back to the land and the resources that it can offer us. So one of the first things we're going to talk about is actually a transportation tool that's been used for thousands of years, but in modern times it's now more looked at as a sport. And that are these, snowshoes. Snowshoes are a really great tool for walking through deep snow in the wintertime without sinking and having to fight back against that over-exhaustion that you would get if you had to just walk around in your boots. So traditionally, snowshoes are made from a tree called white ash, or in the language we'll call it ogamuk, because they're used to make occam snowshoes. The rawhide lacing is then used to weave the pattern to be able to float on top of the snow. So the snowshoes that I'm wearing here are bear paw style snowshoes, and they're actually one of the traditional styles of snowshoes. But you also see now in modern snowshoes, they have ones made out of aluminum and plastics, but with those ones come the use of fossil fuels. So even though you might fall the first few times you're out snowshoeing, you shouldn't let that stop you from trying something new. And if you're gonna go out snowshoeing, try to picking up yourself a pair of the traditional styles. Maybe you can reconnect better with the land that way. The second activity that we're gonna be doing is a survival skill, and it's one of the most necessary survival skills in my opinion, and that's gonna be fire making. Most common rule in fire making is always pick your kindling and your wood above your belly button height. That'll ensure that it's not gonna be wet. So what I like to do is also, when I'm trying to make my fires, not be affecting the land too much as I do that. So not killing any trees to make fire, it doesn't make sense. There's a lot of wood that's already dead in the bush, and that usually comes from conifer trees. Conifer trees have a bunch of boughs and they have really fine twigs, so it becomes very good kindling. That's what you're gonna make your base of your fire with. So because you collected a bunch of dry wood, you don't wanna put it on the ground, because then it'll just get wet. All that time you spent getting dry wood is gonna get wet now. So what you wanna do is find one of these Y branches, and you're gonna wedge all your stuff in there while you clear out an area to make your fire. And find a spot where you can kind of clear out an area. But you're gonna take your biggest pieces of wood that you found, and that'll be the base of your fire. So that'll help keep it off the ground. The most important things that you need for your fire is your igniter source. And so that'll be something like birch bark. You can use really fine twigs. Cattail fluff even works too. And that you'll put that inside of that bundle where all that finer material is. If you can. So you know there's probably a bunch of different ways to get a fire going. You can use flint and steel, friction fires, a bunch of different methods, but these methods you have to practice. And so if you have the chance to practice those, I would suggest doing it. But today we're gonna be using matches. The real good thing about matches, you have to keep them dry. So putting them in things like a Ziploc bag is a good practice to have if you're gonna go into the bush. It makes the matches a lot more practical if they stay dry. So once you got a match out, you can strike it along the striker. You're gonna put that into the birch bark. That birch bark will catch. And then you can just move it around. If you turn it upside down, it'll burn faster. Turn it upside right, it'll burn slower. So just depending on the situation of how quickly you need a fire going. And once it starts going pretty good, you can move that onto your pieces of bigger wood and kind of spread itself out a bit. Once your pile starts to catch, you can move it down to your bigger wood and start piling the other branches you collected on top of it. So we made this example a small fire just because of the situation. We don't really need to make a big fire right now. But in a survival situation, if you needed to get warm fast, that little bundle that we collected, you'd want to be about a person-sized hug of a bundle. And so that way the heat happens a lot quicker, you can get warmer a lot faster. What you can do before you leaving your area is either take some snow and suffocate the fire, That'll be a good way to make sure there's no oxygen getting to it, which is one of the things you need for a fire. Another thing would just be to break everything apart. And if you spread it out well enough, everything will kind of burn as individuals rather than a big group of fire, and it'll go out a lot quicker. So on your way out of the bush, make sure to stop and collect some materials for activity number 3, which is going to be crafting from natural materials. So the land has a bunch of natural materials that can be used for crafting. Things like red osier dogwood and willow are very flexible in winter conditions, well, even all year round. And so it can continuously just be malleable and flexible. So it makes for good materials for crafting for things such as hoops. Birch bark is one of the most versatile things to make different crafts out of. So here's a few things that I've made from birch bark. A couple different styles of baskets, as you can see from here. I just stitched this with sinew. Other times I've used spruce roots to stitch, make different things like a moose call. So as you can see, it's just very versatile. So thanks for joining. I hope you got to learn some new skills and some new things to try out. I wanted to challenge you to get outside to try a new craft, skill, or activity without the requirement of fossil fuels. That's all from me. Thanks for joining.